This week's episode is brought to you in partnership with RotaCloud, the people management platform for shift-based teams. RotaCloud lets managers create and share rotas, record annual leave, and process timesheets in minutes, all from a single web-based app. It makes communicating with your team a doddle, letting your staff check their rotas, receive updates and alerts about their shifts, and even clock in and out using the RotaCloud mobile app. Head over to rotacloud.com/Phil to start your 30-day free trial and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Peter Hancock, award-winning speaker and presenter and all-round hospitality legend. Coming up on today's show, Peter gets to the bottom of the world political problems.
The President of the United States hasn't done that job before.
Phil gives Peter some advice for the show. Get your hands dirty, Peter, and get stuck in. And Peter is a little harsh on himself.
It's very difficult to avoid me, Phil, but well worth the effort.
All that and so much more as we chat through Peter's wonderful career so far. Peter is one of life's energy givers, and so time spent in his company only brings a smile to your face. And there's smiles all the way through our chat. He chats us through his journey with such ease and humour and with a humility that is rarely heard. Not only that, but he's a natural storyteller and he's got some crackers for you all to enjoy. A massive thank you to Peter. One final thing before we get into it, and I know I go on about this, but if you can take 2 seconds to subscribe to the show and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, it really makes a huge difference. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to the absolute legend of our industry that is none other than Peter Hancock. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Phil. But great pleasure to be with you.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Phil. Yep,
good.
As well as a 64-year-old can expect to be, who hasn't really looked after himself particularly well.
Great stuff. I feel like there's a story there. But, I suppose that this industry can be an industry of indulgence at times.
Yes, I think long in the past, people who were heavy drinkers were drawn to the idea of owning a pub and so on. But I haven't seen much evidence of that in recent years. I think everybody's very focused on getting on with their job, trying to make some money, and keep out of trouble. So,
yeah,
I wouldn't say that our industry was quite as notorious for bad living as it used to be.
Yeah, well, I heard something quite recently. I'm now what would be considered to be a middle-aged man, and apparently at middle age you have a midlife crisis, and still waiting for it, or might be living it right in front of my eyes at the moment. I don't know. Maybe this is my midlife crisis, but the midlife crisis that people used to do were go out and buy, a motorbike or, that sports car that they always wanted or something like that. But now the midlife crisis is getting in shape. That's what I've heard.
Yes.
So I am actually, I have joined that bandwagon. I am doing my level best.
Good for you. Yes, I mean, a lot of my contemporaries and former colleagues have done the long hospitality action cycles, and they've trekked in Nepal with Springboard and so on. And I do admire them, but there's no way I'd be fit enough to go with them.
Well, we all have our areas of expertise. We stick in our lanes, as it were. So where do we find you today? Where are you?
I'm at home in Wiltshire, in the cottage that I've lived in for 30 years, Phil.
Very nice. It looks very pleasant in the background. Anybody listening can't see it, but
it's quite a good place to live if you have to travel around the British Isles, as I've done for the last 30 or so years. Nowhere is too far. London's just over an hour. Going north's easy. Going southwest is easy.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good place.
Very good. Excellent. Right. Well, let's get into it then. Take us all the way back to the beginning of your career. How did you get into hospitality in the first place?
I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this to you, Phil, but I didn't plan to go into hospitality.
Right.
I planned to have a life of luxury and ease because I was deluded and thought that we were fabulously wealthy. Well, we were briefly as a family. My father had hit the jackpot in the 1950s with a magazine called Spick and Span. I don't think anybody's old enough to remember it now, but it did get a brief mention on Only Fools and Horses when Derek Trotter was reminiscing about his days as a newspaper delivery boy. Right. I did get a mention on a Peter Cook and Dudley Moore sketch once, actually. But unbelievably, it may be to today's audience, a little black and white magazine with healthy young ladies in bikinis, which sold for a shilling, and it was a weekly publication. It absolutely took off, and so we had this wonderful upbringing. My four siblings and I really didn't think that we would ever need to work. So I made no effort at school. I didn't pass exams.
Right.
And when it turned out that I was completely wrong about all this and that there was there was no future for me with spick and span, I just took the first job I could get, which was behind the bar at Pontin's holiday camp in Bracklesham Bay. Literally, this was the day after I finished school,
Right.
and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was the work was easy. Everyone was in a good mood because they were on holiday. As a young team, we all got on well. If you think of Love Island and imagine it with slightly uglier contestants, that's what it was, and in British weather, that's what it was like basically. But
Yeah, that sounds
I
amazing.
took to it like a duck to water. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, funnily enough, that was my first job out of university was in a holiday park. It's at Haggerston Castle Holiday Park, and by God, you see some life at certain
Yes,
times of the year.
yes.
In there, yeah, it was a favoured destination of the Glasgow holidays and the Newcastle holidays, and let's just say that those group of people like to drink when they came to
Yeah.
Haggerston Castle.
I bet they do, or did.
Yes.
Well, so that was a brief job, of course. Whilst I was there, a friend came and gave me a tip off that the Roman Way Hotel and Country Club, which I knew very well locally, was looking for a waiter. And I thought, well, that actually would suit me even better. So I applied for that job and got it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, the head waiter left. And the owners very rashly put me into that position. And one thing led to another. I was promoted ever so quickly, and by the age of 21, I was running the hotel. So I became,
Wow.
I was a very young GM, very
Yeah.
young, totally inexperienced, untrained, with hindsight, not particularly good at it. But I suppose, the key thing, I was trusted, to lock it all up properly and, not steal the money,
Yeah.
and to be nice to people.
So, if from a school perspective, where you were, I suppose, not exactly full of drive and not exactly focused on, doing the best that you could and all of that kind of thing, what was there a point when you went into the workforce where you began to think to yourself, "Oh, I can do this. And not only can I do this, I can do this well enough that people trust me to do it."
Yes, it was like being born again in a way because my life had purpose. I found that I was quite good at something, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was being paid to do it. So there was a purpose to getting up and going to work, where school just made no sense to me at all. I couldn't see the point in it,
Yeah.
uh, which of course is I now realise the stupidity of that approach. And yes, I think you're right. We all love to be trusted and we want to prove that we're worthy of it. And so I've held managerial positions ever since, well, right up until my recent retirement.
Mm. So you were a hotel GM at 21 years old. What size of just tell the type of hotel
It was
size, that
quite
sort of thing?
small. It was a hotel and country club, so it had various sporting facilities and a membership, a local membership, as well as being a hotel. We had 24 rooms, and so it was pretty small. And the owners were local. We saw quite a lot of them. My relationship with them was very, very straightforward. They told me what to do, and I did it. There was never any, argument about that.
Yeah.
In fact, the gentleman who owned the hotel was terribly kind to me. I lost my driving license when I was working there, and I thought, well, that's going to be the end of this job. And he not only kept me on and allowed me to use taxis where previously I would have driven, for example, to the cash and carry and so on, but he actually paid my legal fees as well. So,
Right.
how lucky was I?
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the conversations I've had. I don't really want to focus on the word luck. I think luck comes your way when lots of other things are in play, and I think if you don't get that offer from somebody if they don't see something in you or like what you're doing or can see that you are doing your best, and you've got you want to do the best for the business and all of these sorts of things. I think the luck then comes, somebody supports you when you've kind of given back in that way.
I guess so. And ours is a trade, isn't it, where an awful lot of responsibility has to be passed to other people. You can't do everything yourself. So
Yeah.
you're having to trust people. And yes, giving somebody who's young and relatively inexperienced a big responsibility would be seen by the recipient of that as a stroke of luck. That's certainly how I saw it.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Okay. So, what happened next?
So I worked there for a little while, and then was invited to go on to another hotel on Hayling Island, the Newtown House. Now that is still there, I believe. So I'd gone up from a 2-star to a 3-star. That's that's as far as I got.
Well,
That was a
it's a
slightly
step in the
larger.
right direction.
It was, and it was a larger hotel, far more corporate, and did a lot of weddings and big events. And I had replaced a married couple who'd been employed as the management team there. So it was really 2 jobs to be done by one person. It was very, very tough going, but again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had some lovely colleagues, and stayed there until I was invited to go to another business, a restaurant called Halliday's in Funtington. So this is going down to a much smaller operation, but the appeal there was that I would have a relatively easy life. I admitted to you before that I'm not an ambitious person, Phil,
Yeah.
and a nice flat above the restaurant, and it was all going to be, so well within my capability. It appealed to me very much. I stayed there for 2 years. Then spent a year in partnership with a former colleague at a pub in Chichester, which wasn't such a happy time, I have to say. We turned the catering part of it into a business of our own, although the pub itself belonged to somebody else who owned the hotel next door. Yeah, that was probably one of the mistakes I've made doing that. It just appealed to me, the idea of being a partner rather than an employee. And I now realize that there are 2 kinds of individuals in this world, Phil: entrepreneurs and all the rest of us. And
Right.
I'm not an entrepreneur. It
Okay.
suits me very well to be working for other people. I don't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I don't have that bravery or that need to strike out on one's own.
Right.
And then I sold wine for a bit, and somebody that I was employed by selling wine was a very good friend of the late Derek Johansson, who started a famous and very successful hotel guide in the 1980s. And I ended up working for them. And that was another job that I had no preparation for, no training for, but it seemed to suit me awfully well. Literally signing up hoteliers to appear in a published guide, and then we produced spin-off titles, inns, country houses, business meeting venues, and so on. And I was quickly promoted in that organisation too. So I went from a regional inspector in '88, and I think by the early '90s I was the publisher, and then I was made group publishing director. So I was in charge of all the British titles in the portfolio. There were about 7 of them.
And what does that job entail, Peter, as a publishing
Yes,
director?
good question. So when
Are you
you
still trying to figure that out?
when you publish something like an illustrated guide, you've got 2 objectives. You want to sell as many copies as you can, and you want to charge as much as possible for the pages within it.
Right.
And bear in mind, this is pre-internet, so we had no real competition. It was relatively easy. And what I had to do was to cultivate a team of regional inspectors who would cover the whole country, and I suppose you would say motivate them, encourage them to do the very best they could in getting the finest properties to want to be in the guide and to agree to part with the money to be in it. I think we were charging a couple of thousand pounds a year for a page at that time. It grew over the years. Um, Initially, we were owned by Hobson's Publishing in Cambridge, and then Hobson's became a PLC, and they sold the Johansson's title to the Daily Mail and General Trust. And we all thought, well, that's probably going to be the end of us then. We've had a lovely run, but actually, the Daily Mail were brilliant with us because they brought resources and their form of ambition to what we were doing. And I seemed to fit in quite well, despite it being a larger company that I'd ever been part of. And yeah, one thing led to another. So I was able to bow out in 2000 at a time of my own choosing, having been 12 years with Johansson's, because the Pride of Britain opportunity came up. But had that not happened, I probably would have stayed with Johansson's until the end of my working life, because it was a wonderful organisation. Funnily enough, soon after I left, they sold to Condé Nast.
Right.
So new regime change all over again.
Yeah.
That seems to be what happens. I walked away from the Roman way and it became an old people's home. Walk away from Johansson's, it gets sold to somebody else.
Right. Well, I suppose that's just that's a fact of life, isn't it? That that things evolve and change and all of that. Nothing can stay the same forever. Even the old institutions, and I say that in inverted commas, with the likes of the Ritz and the Dorchester and all of these wonderful hotels, even they evolve.
Well,
I
that's
think that
true.
the core of what they offer still remains the same, but but actually you've got to move with the times.
Yes, I think every business has to be able to reinvent itself every now and then.
Yeah.
And certainly we did that. Well, within my time with Johansson's Guides, we did that. It became far more professional and far better known during the time that I was lucky enough to be with them. And of course, with Pride of Britain Hotels, which was my next major job, that was a constant case of reinvention and evolution. We never really stood still,
Yeah.
although we tried to hold on to the core of what made it special.
Right. Did that you mentioned that you were at Johansson's and very happy? Was that were you then approached for the Pride of Britain Hotels job?
No, no. I applied for. I knew my predecessor, Michael Yeo, and in a private conversation, he had told me when he was expecting to retire, and I remember thinking then that job's got my name on it. That really
Right.
had. I thought I could really do something with that. I mean, it wasn't a highfalutin role, really. Chief executive is a grand title, but it was a very small organisation. Well, it still is small, but it was even smaller then, and it had no money really to speak of, and was trying very ambitiously to represent its collection of independent hotels all over the world, which was something that I was able to change actually, and become more focused and just look at the UK. But yes, I thought, well, that's the job for me, and I applied for it, and it was quite funny. I later learned that the interviews had been conducted over 2 days because there were so many worthy applicants, and on the first day they'd picked their man. And so half of the board went back to their hotels and said to the others, "Oh, do you mind just going through the motions with day two? Obviously we've made our selection." And I
Right.
arrived on day two,
Right.
unaware of this, of course.
Yeah.
And apparently I was a breath of fresh air, Phil, because I didn't pretend to know everything. In fact, to a lot of the questions, my answer was, "I'm terribly sorry, I don't know anything about that." Oh, I see. And then there'd be another question. I say, no, I have no experience in that area either. And
Yeah.
basically, what they decided was, he's a blithering idiot, but at least he's honest. Let's have him. And I think that was more or less their thinking. And so, change of plan,
I
everybody,
love that.
and I got the job. But that was in 2000, and it was a life changing thing for me, really. And I then spent 21 happy years doing my best to keep Pride of Britain afloat.
Yeah, which we will absolutely get into very, very shortly. But I love that, and I think there's a monumental lesson in there because especially when it comes to interviewing, I think a lot of people, and I interview a lot of people for the job that I do, always, well, not always, but they generally will answer a question based around what they think you want to hear.
Yes.
But actually, if you just come at it from a complete and utter authenticity perspective of, well, I do know something about that, but that's an area that I know nothing. But
Mm.
I think equally then, if you can demonstrate in your career that you have, we all go into many situations in our life not knowing how to handle it,
Of
what to
course we
do,
do.
but you learn as you go.
Mm. Yes. I mean, the President of the United States hasn't done that job before.
Yeah,
It happens all the time.
yeah,
So, yes, hopefully there are certain skills that one can translate to any role, really, given the opportunity.
yeah, absolutely. So, arrival, Pride of Britain hotels, and what was the I suppose the task in front of you at that time? When were you given a clear remit, or was it a case of just get your hands dirty, Peter, and get stuck in?
No, I was given a very clear remit because in that organisation, which is a not-for-profit consortium, you're reporting to a board which represents the membership, the member hoteliers.
Yeah.
And they gave me a very clear brief. They said, we want this organisation needs to move with the times. Its brand needs to move on. We need to demonstrate results for our members. And I think the way they put it to me at the interview was, it's time for the old farts to get out of the way.
Right.
Which, of course, I later became that very person myself.
Well, if we're lucky, it all happens to us all.
Yes. And I think I fulfilled that remit. There was one particular element of it, which was to make bookings more demonstrably the result of being a member. And I never thought that was a very good idea. And I sort of quietly schemed against it. And in fact, if I can lay claim to a legacy, it is to have distanced the annual membership fee from measurable results. Because I think if you're too fixated about that, you always try to become the middleman involved in the actual reservation process, where in fact independent hotels who are members of a consortium, they benefit far more from the brand becoming better known and respected, and people using whatever channel they like to book a hotel. And if they book directly with a hotel because of something they've seen in the Sunday Times, which is because of something that Pride of Britain's done, then that is a result. But you can't prove it, you can't measure it. And I think over the years we managed to separate the fee from actual, numbers of reservations, and I think that was a good thing. And the other major change, which I might have mentioned just a moment ago, was not trying to do more than we were capable of. So we disengaged from the international travel trade and left that really to the big boys like Relais and Chateau and Preferred and Small Luxury, and we concentrated on where we knew we could be effective, which was within the UK. So that gave us a point of difference, and in fact it enabled us to share member hotels with some of those other organisations. So that was a step forward.
Yeah, and I suppose with that it's very much then around choose one thing and do that as good, as well as you can do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were 20 years.
It was just over 21 years. I stayed a little longer than I'd originally intended because of the pandemic. We had to get through the aftermath of the very expensive lockdown.
Yeah.
During the lockdowns, of course, the hotels were closed. We couldn't expect to be taking membership fees from them, and yet we still had most of the operating costs of the consortium, most of the commitments we'd already entered into. So we had to hand back a very substantial amount of money. And it was touch and go. I mean, if the lockdown had been another 6 months, I think we probably would have been finished off. But we did have a reserve. We had fantastic help from our suppliers and our sponsors and our team, of course, making it possible for us to get through that, to hand all that money back and still remain solvent. So I hung on until late 21. So I was able to pass it to my successor with no debt.
Great stuff, yeah. And I suppose the comment you make there around if it had been 6 months longer, it might have been the end of us. I think a lot of businesses could feel the pain of that. If that had continued on for any longer, we might have been the same ourselves, to be honest. So it was a very timely release, I think, at that point.
Yes. Yes, I mean we're still feeling the aftermath of it because, of course, the economy is in a parlous state because of excessive government spending, and I suppose now inflation is the number one worry for most people in business. Finding staff is probably still pretty close behind. So these are problems that are hangovers really from what occurred in the previous 5 years.
Sorry to interrupt, but a quick word to give special mention to our sponsor, RotaCloud, without whom this podcast wouldn't even be possible. With thousands of customers worldwide, RotaCloud is already saving businesses like yours hundreds of hours of staffing-related admin every year. It's been described by its users as everything from a lifesaver to an absolute no-brainer, with one customer even saying that they'd rather stick forks in their eyes than go back to doing their rotas the old-fashioned way. If you're ready to take the pain out of people management, I highly recommend heading over to rotacloud.com/Phil to sign up for your free 30-day trial and see how RotaCloud can benefit your business. Now let's get back to it. Yeah, absolutely. You obviously somehow managed to get into speaking at some point. How did that come about? Because obviously we'll talk about what you're doing now and all that as we get through the conversation. But where did that all begin?
I can't pinpoint it to one thing, Phil, but during my time with Johansson's, I probably should have mentioned I was commuting an absurd distance. I was travelling all over the country, but I was also going backwards and forwards to London, many days a week.
Mm,
And it was all pretty exhausting, and it did cost me my marriage indirectly. And one thing that I did as a release, really, from the drudgery, was to join our local amateur dramatics group in the village where I still live now.
right.
And I loved doing that. It gave me something to absolutely concentrate on, so you forget about everything else while you're doing it. And certainly at that time, I found learning the lines was quite easy. And at our level in amateur dramatics, no real skill is expected. If you can stand in the right place and more or less deliver the lines that are written, you're the hero. So
Yeah.
I kept getting parts. I kept getting the upper class part because I don't have a Wiltshire accent, don't have a West Country accent like a lot of my colleagues did. And yes, it was great fun. I did probably about 10 or 12 plays over the years. The final one, where I thought maybe this is time to give it up, was The Importance of Being Earnest. And I had the title role, and I very stupidly encouraged some of our member hoteliers to come along and watch the final performance, which was on the Saturday night. And towards the end of the play, there's a very important scene where my character takes the book off the shelf, opens it at a certain page, and turns to his girlfriend and says, "You see, Gwendolen, I always told you my name was Ernest, didn't I? Now we know it's true." But what I actually heard myself saying was, "You see, Ernest, I always told you my name was Gwendolen, didn't I?" Well, it brought the house down. Brought the house down. The director was furious, and I thought, oh, maybe it's time to throw in the towel. But yes, hosting regional meetings and the awards do and so on, I accidentally got a bit of practice at standing on stage. And I had learned from our erstwhile chairman at Hobson's, Adrian Bridgewater, that if you just put a couple of little funny remarks in, everyone listens more keenly.
Mm,
So the important thing you want to tell them, they are listening because they're waiting for the next funny thing. It's like sort of throwing a bone, I suppose. And I thought, well, that's the way to do it. So I tried to copy him, really.
yeah.
Yeah, my first big event was a Springboard award fundraising dinner where Anne Pierce had been let down by a celebrity host. And so she called me and said, "Would you do it?" And so at short notice, I stepped in and did it. And I had practiced some material beforehand, which went down far better than I dreamt it would go. And so I got the confidence, well, I could do this again if somebody else asks me. And
Yeah.
now people keep asking.
Yeah. Well, good. And long may that continue.
Yeah.
The thing about that is that there. Do you ever suffer with that imposter syndrome thing at the beginning? Do you still suffer with it now? I don't know.
What do you mean by that feeling I don't deserve to be here?
Yeah, or how did I'm not ready for this, or there are other people out there who are better at this
Oh,
than me. That
gosh, yes, all the time, of course. Absolutely. Yes, many's the time I've been just about to go on and do something, and I thought, oh, God, what an idiot you are. Why didn't you just say no? And I could be, comfortably at home watching Coronation Street with Michelle now, my lovely wife. But as soon as people start reacting and maybe laughing at something that you say, or get a round of applause, then you think, well, there's nowhere I'd rather be. How lucky to be the centre of attention just for these few minutes.
Yeah. Indeed. No, I mean I've been lucky enough to see you do your thing a couple of times now, and you definitely have a way. Everyone,
Thank you.
it's almost a case of, because I think a lot of people in the industry know you now, for sure, in that
Well,
regard.
I'm. It's very difficult to avoid me, Phil, but well worth the effort.
Yeah. Very good. And you see, that's the thing. I completely agree with you on humour. I think humour is the great leveler, and I believe personally that it's the tonic for life. I think we all just feel better about ourselves when we're having a little bit of a laugh.
Yes, we do. And a lot of events. You're a veteran of hospitality events, as am I, and some of them would be intolerable if we didn't have a bit of a laugh along the way. Some awards events go on far too long,
Mm.
and some speeches go on far too long. But that's okay if you can have just a little bit of pleasure along the way, I think, a little bit of laughter.
Yeah.
Recently, I attended the memorial of a very good friend, the late Stuart Johnson, who used to run Brown's Hotel in London.
Yeah.
And a speech was given by Sir Rocco Forte. And obviously, they were very good friends, and it was terribly upsetting for us all. But he put some humour into that room, and everybody was just delighted. And it gave us the release that we so needed, just to be allowed to have a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
And he did it beautifully, I have to say.
Yeah. It's a talent, isn't it, to be able to find the humor in a moment like that, that on the face of it you feel like it's not really the place, but in actual fact, wherever you are in your life, the humor can be a wonderful solution to whatever it is that's in
Yes,
front of you.
yes. I mean, it can diffuse an argument. It can stop. Oh, I mean, I can't think of this without thinking of David Morgan Hewitt, a very well-known figure in our industry, of course,
Yeah.
managing director at the Goring. Now, he was our chairman at Pride to Britain for 5 years, and he knows better than most people how to use humour. And when he was chairing those meetings, it was an absolute joy to watch him, because somebody would make a suggestion that he and I both knew was daft. And anybody else would say, that's an interesting suggestion. Thank you very much. Well, Peter, I'm sure you'd like to make a note of that, and we'll look into that, won't we? Knowing very well we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And David would have the ability to just say to them, oh, you silly ass, that's a ridiculous idea. Shut up and drink your coffee. Nobody else could get away with that, but he could, because he made it funny.
Absolutely. No, it's one of the things for me around that we don't talk enough about. That this kind of stuff, the humor and the fun, happens in hospitality every day, on
Yes.
every shift. And of course, there are times where it's just monumentally stressful and all of
Mm.
that. But that's the same in any walk of life, in any job that you do. But this industry never ceases to amaze me with the fun that exists on a day-to-day basis.
I agree, and maybe it's because all the people we know in the trade are dealing with people all the time.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody gets more practice than they do at starting a conversation, making people feel happy, knowing when to end a conversation, and just having those courteous thoughts all the time. What more can we do for them? How can we make that better? How can I make that employee feel better about themselves? How can I show my appreciation? They're doing it instinctively all day, every day. And so it's no surprise that they're jolly good company when they all get together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one way of putting it. Yes, I think it's carnage is another way of putting it sometimes. But yeah, now I send out a form to all my guests before they come on the show, just to get you thinking about some anecdotes to stuff that's happened to you. There was one that especially triggered my interest, which was something around bungling your celebrity MasterChef
Oh
experience.
yes, that's right. Well, so I'm not a TV performer in any sense, and never could be. I'm really quite hopeless in front of a camera. But years ago, a contact invited me to be one of the eaters on Celebrity MasterChef. We were on the Orient Express train, and all we had to do was eat three courses and talk about them, and just look the
Sounds
part and be
sounds like the
sensible. I
best job in
thought,
the world.
well, yes. What could be easier, you might think? So we were welcomed onto the train, given our seats, and given a glass of champagne, and they explained what would be happening. The finalists were Christine Hamilton, Dick Strawbridge, and Lisa Falconer, who went on to become John Turot's partner, I think.
Yep.
Uh, and the starter eventually arrived, and the camera crew came in and started zooming in on my food and then my face. And the producer said, talk to us about your starter. And I was absolutely stuck for words. I was sweating, my mouth was dry, my mind went completely blank because of the camera. And all I could mutter was, very nice. Cut. No, 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 no. He said, you'll have to do better than that. Describe the colours and flavours on the plate. Yes, yes, of course. I said, I'll do my best. Action. Very good. Oh, this is hopeless, he said. Well, we'll have to go and interview somebody else. Go down the carriage and talk to somebody else. Anybody else would be better than that. And I felt so ashamed. I dressed up for the day. I'd gone to London and I was a waste of space, completely useless. I felt really bad about it. But as the day wore on, we were given a lot of wine, of course, and
I say, as the
there was
champagne took
banter
hold.
between us. Yes, we started to get to know each other in our carriage. And by the time the pudding came out, which Christine Hamilton had made, I'd gained in confidence, and I was quite pleased to see the film crew coming back in. And they came to me again, "What do you think of the ginger tart?" And I looked straight in the lens and I said, "She can't cook." Now they didn't use that, Phil, but
Really? Really?
some slightly unkind comments were used. So yeah, that was my experience of TV stardom
Yeah.
for famous for half a second.
Are you still waiting for the call back?
No, I mean, when I said that I'm not ambitious, that is absolutely true. I have no ambitions to be a famous person or to be on television or anything like that. I will just go with the flow. If somebody asks me to do something, I'll try it. But I now know to say no if ever asked to do something in front of a camera.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. That's comedy gold in itself. Um, yeah, superb. So you're you. I think you said retired, but I would suggest it's semi-retired, really, isn't it? You're still
Well,
keeping your eye in.
yes, I don't have a job as such. That was the effect of leaving prior to Britain in November 2021. But I do have an ambassadorial role with James Hallam Insurance, which I thoroughly enjoy. This involves a few introductions, hosting various networking lunches, and so on. And they're a lovely company, and they're very, very good people to be associated with. So I'm enjoying that. And recently, I've been appointed chair of the Quality Advisory Board for Visit England and the AA, with the remit to simplify and modernize the star ratings systems. So that's quite a big job, actually. It'll take us maybe half a year, and the board is made up of representatives of all the different categories that are assessed. So self-catering, glamping, bed and breakfast, hotels, obviously, and so on. And a very interesting group of people with a lot of ideas. And I think it's my job to try and make sense of all the input and come up with recommendations for those two organisations that they can use going forward.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're just doing something that just, for want of a better phrase, tickles your fancy.
Well, that's true, actually. Yes, I mean, the luxury of reaching this stage in life is you don't have to say yes to everything that comes your way. I mean, I'm quite closely involved with the Independent Hotel Show, which includes presenting the awards there, but I try to help a little bit with the business sessions that they're going to cover, making sure that it's relevant to visitors to the show in any given year. And yes, bits and pieces like that. And obviously, the speaking jobs are one offs. It'll be an after dinner or hosting an awards event or hosting a conference. Some are repeated. I've done Cater Force a couple of times. I've done there's a health organization that I've done for three times now. That was just the other day that was completed, and I really enjoy that because the expectation isn't the same as for a comedian, where you have to entertain everybody for a period of time. It's actually a deadly serious job. You have to keep the conference running smoothly and on time and introduce each speaker in a respectful way. But you do get the odd little opportunity to put something in that perhaps creates mirth. And that's the gold for me. That is the sparkle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're an energy giver,
Oh,
Peter, is what you are. You
bless you.
you give your energy to other people, and I think that's just it's a wonderful trait to have. Something that I've realised quite late in my life to this point. Hopefully, I'm not late in my life, but actually, it's a real. It's another one of the joys of hospitality is that you surround yourself with so many people who are willing to give a bit of themselves to the situation in front of them, and I think that you can't help but admire that as a quality in people.
Yes, we are probably exposed to more of that than than people in a lot of other industries.
Yeah.
Because of course I get asked to speak at events that are nothing to do with hospitality. I think the last paid one I did was for marine insurance, the Marine Insurance Association in Manchester. Prior to that, the Pipeline Industries Guild. So it's all sorts. And there isn't that sense of camaraderie among operators in other industries that we have in hospitality. Rivals, people running hotels that directly compete against each other, are friends. And I think if it may not be unique to hospitality, but it certainly marks it out as unusual.
Yeah, very much so. And I think equally in times of industry crisis rather than individual business crisis, the knowledge base around all this network of industry friends is I've never seen it more cohesive than it is in this moment that we're in now.
Yes, I agree. And the networks, of course, are many and various. You've got the mastering holders, you've got UK Hospitality, of course, which lobbies and represents the industry so very well. You've got the consortia, you've got Hospitality Action and Springboard. It goes on and on. And many people are involved in more than one of those.
Mm,
HOSPA, I should have mentioned also.
yeah,
Um,
Institute of Hospitality as well.
the daddy of them all,
Yeah,
Institute of Hospitality, which was the enormous membership that it has. Yes, that's right. So yeah, I think it does create the sense that we're all on the same side.
yeah, absolutely. And but much work to be done, I think, is never. There's always work to be done, isn't there?
Yeah, well, life would be a bit boring if there's nothing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, for somebody who is not ambitious, in your own words, uh, did you ever think that you'd end up becoming the CEO of an organisation like Pride of Britain Hotels, or did you ever think that you would be getting into the world of speaking? Was there ever? Well, if you go back
Oh
to who you were
no.
as a younger person,
Oh, I've never been asked that before. Well, no, certainly not, because I was very shy. I mean, I suppose inside I still am shy. I've just learned how to mask it, to pretend to be confident.
yeah,
I remember as a late teenager, absolutely hating going to discos, but pretending to enjoy it was
yeah, I
the
was
only
the
way of
same
getting
actually.
through it, really. And if anybody asks me now, or I've got to go and give a speech, got any advice for me? The only thing I would ever say is pretend to enjoy it, because then it will make it slightly more bearable for you and for everybody else.
Yeah, I was nothing worse than seeing somebody on stage who looks like they do not want to be there.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And you want to put them out of their misery at the earliest opportunity, don't you?
Yes, indeed.
No, no. So I didn't foresee any of this, and I still don't know what would have suited me really had I knuckled down and decided on a proper career, and gone to university and had an ology or you know gone into law or something like that. I've no idea whether that would have worked out. We'll
Yeah,
never know.
no, indeed. But I think that's what's at the risk of sounding unbelievably philosophical, that is the joy of life, really, isn't it? And I think what I really take from your career journey to this point is the words that you used yourself earlier on, which is you've kind of just gone with the flow of
Yes.
things.
Now you've just triggered something. At one of these business lunches that we had for James Hallam the other day, I asked everybody around the table, "What's the biggest mistake you've ever made?" We didn't want to make it boring, and how's business? Got any problems? So it was like,
Yeah,
What was your best decision, and things like that, just to stimulate conversation. And I asked our host, "What was the biggest mistake you've ever made?" And he said that in all his years, his early years of success, he was totally focused on business and making money, and to the extent that he let everything else slip by without appreciating it. His family, his free time, he didn't stop to smell the roses. That was
mm,
his biggest regret.
yeah,
And I suppose my life has been the opposite, really. I always have stopped and smelled the roses and enjoyed, the trivia and, having lunch with people just because you like them rather than because there's anything to sell to them. As a consequence, I have not achieved very much in material terms. I haven't really got very far career wise, but I've had a good life. So I don't look back on my career with the regret that I was too focused on it. I was probably not focused enough, frankly,
Right.
but I've had a life.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? I mean, there is no one perfect way to do things, right? It's about finding the perfect way for you as an individual. And again, your words way back at the beginning, it was about around purpose. And as long as what you're doing gives you enough purpose to get out of bed in the morning and do what you do with passion and vigor, then don't judge yourself by what others perceive to be success. The greatest success, here we are, going again, more philosophical stuff. The greatest measure of success is happiness, I think.
Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, some of the greatest treats, work-wise, for me, have been when I've been trusted to host something, say the Master Inholders Conference, which I've been lucky enough to be the MC for many years in a row,
Yeah,
the Gold Service Scholarship, things like that. It's like being given a Rolls Royce just to take it out for a spin. All the
yeah,
work's been done by others. I've played no part in creating it or making it as marvelous as it is. I've just been given a chance to, just take the steering wheel for a little while and just give it a bit of a run. And that, well, of course, is hugely enjoyable. So yes, I accept what you say. Success should be measured, I think, in happiness rather than in material terms. But none of us wants to be grindingly poor. So there is
yeah.
there is a halfway house,
You have to
probably.
get the balance right. Yes, for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah, fantastic. No, look, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I look forward to bumping into you at many more industry events around the place. I'm sure I'll see you again very very soon. What before you go, what three reasons would you give to somebody as to why they should come into hospitality as a career?
Well, firstly, I would say if you don't really enjoy being with people, don't bother. But if you do enjoy being with people, it is one of the most rewarding careers you could possibly choose. Rapid promotion, if you're any good, as I like to think I'm living proof of, and the sense that you're part of an industry that is looking after itself and looking out for each other, and no more obviously than how we got through the lockdowns and an event that I think I saw you at, Phil, on one occasion, Back to the Floor. There's the industry coming together
Indeed.
to raise money for
Yeah, what
charity,
an
very
event that is.
successfully, in fact.
Just
Um,
brilliant.
yes. So I don't know if that's answered your question satisfactorily, but um,
Absolutely.
most people who come into hospitality stay in it. It's pretty unusual once you've got past the entry level to leave our industry, even if you go off and do something that's maybe as a supplier or as a consultant or whatever. Very few people actually fully leave our industry because it has a gravitational pull on us, I think.
Yeah, I think it's all about the point you make at the beginning of that piece around the human connection. I just don't think there's another industry that gives you such a wide opportunity for human connection than this industry. And you're living proof of that in terms of what you've achieved so far. You know what you're doing, and you're still monumentally connected to the industry and the things that you do that give you joy as well, even if you do feel the nerves from time to time. But the nerves
Yeah.
are good, right? The
No,
nerves are,
nerves are good. No, without nerves, you're too relaxed and then it'll all go wrong.
yeah, absolutely. Peter, thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you to learn more about you, chew the fat about your life and career, or hire you for
Hmm.
a speaking gig, what would be the best method for them
Well,
to do
I,
that?
I have a modest website, Phil, hancockspeaks.co.uk. My email address is peter@hancockspeaks.co.uk.
I mean, that does exactly what it says on the tin
It
moment, doesn't it?
does. That's right.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you, Phil. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you soon.
Take care.
And there we have it, another wonderful story from hospitality with one of the true gentlemen of the industry. Look out for Peter at an event near you. As he says, it's hard to avoid him. We will of course be back next Wednesday at 8 PM with another cracking story from hospitality, but until then, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.